Most people don't know what their home is doing to them. Their plants do. Let's say you have 3 plants in the same room. A pothos on the shelf, a spider plant near the window, a peace lily on the floor by the couch. 3 different plants, 3 different shapes, and you've noticed something is off with all of them. But the symptoms look different, so you assume 3 different problems. You probably don't have 3 problems. You have 1. And all 3 plants are reporting it to you simultaneously, in their own language. The spider plant has brown, crispy tips, just the very ends, like they got singed. The pothos has edges that curl slightly under, the surface of the leaf pulling inward like it's trying to protect itself. The peace lily looks fine most of the time, but some mornings it droops, dramatically, almost theatrically, and then recovers by afternoon without you doing anything. Different plants, different responses, same signal. The air in that room is too dry, and depending on how your home is built, how long the AC runs, and where the vents are placed, it might be significantly drier than you've ever considered. Here's why the symptoms look different. Every plant has a different threshold and a different way its tissue responds to low humidity. The spider plant is pushing water to its tips constantly. When evaporation wins, the tips die. The pothos curls its leaf edges to physically reduce the surface area exposed to dry air. It's a structural defense. The peace lily has almost no defense mechanism. It just loses turgor pressure and collapses, then recovers when night comes and the AC cycles down and humidity slightly rises. 3 different anatomies, 3 different coping strategies. 1 shared reading. This room is running dry. Now, most plants in this situation are just telling you something is wrong. But there's 1 plant that goes further. It doesn't just show you the problem, it tracks it for you in near real time. The calathea. Calathea leaves move. During the day, when light and heat are up and humidity is lower, they flatten out. At night, or when the air gets more moisture, they curl upward and inward, a behavior botanists call nyctinasty. But what it actually means for you is this. You have a plant that is physically responding to humidity fluctuations on a daily cycle, visibly, without any equipment. If your calathea's leaves are flat and crispy-edged in the afternoon and never seem to move much anymore, your room's humidity is consistently too low to trigger the response. The mechanism has basically given up trying. If they're still moving, curling at night, opening in the morning, you're somewhere in the functional range. It's not perfect, it's not a number, but it's a directional reading you can observe with your eyes every single day for free in your own living room. Try this right now. Look at any of these plants, or honestly any plant you have, and instead of asking, "What does this plant need?" ask a different question. What is this plant telling me about right now, in this room, at this hour? That shift sounds small. It isn't, because here's where this lands. The air you breathe at home, the humidity, the temperature swings, the airflow patterns, most of us have almost no awareness of it. We feel comfortable or uncomfortable, and we adjust the thermostat. But we're not actually tracking anything. We're not learning anything about the space we spend the majority of our lives in. These plants have been in that space with you. They've been responding to it every single hour. The brown tips, the curling edges, the dramatic morning droops. That's not failure. That's a continuous log of your indoor environment that you've been walking past without reading. You don't have to become an air quality obsessive. You don't need sensors and apps and dashboards. But you can choose to pay slightly more attention to what's already in front of you and realize that your home has a measurable character and you can get to know it. And that knowledge is worth having. Not for the plants, for you. Now look away from those plants for a second. Look at the other side of the room. You probably have something over there too. Maybe a snake plant you put there because someone told you snake plants survive anywhere. maybe a pothos trailing off a shelf because it looked good in the corner. And if you've had them long enough, you've noticed something. Not dramatic, not urgent, but something is off. The snake plant's leaves are thinner than they used to be. The newer ones look slightly paler than the ones that grew in earlier. The pothos, instead of growing outward and full, is stretching. Long gaps between each leaf, reaching in one specific direction, like it's trying to get somewhere. You probably thought, needs fertilizer, needs a bigger pot, just getting old. It's not any of those things. These plants are reading a completely different variable in your room. Not humidity, light. Specifically, the quality and geometry of how light actually moves through your space across the day. Here's what's happening structurally. Plants don't just need light. They need light that hits with enough intensity to drive photosynthesis productively. Below a certain threshold, the plant doesn't stop functioning, it starts rationing. It puts out thinner leaves to save energy on construction. It grows longer internodes, the gaps between leaves, because it's essentially reaching, trying to find better light before committing resources to a full leaf. The pale color is chlorophyll being produced at reduced levels because there's no point manufacturing the full amount when there isn't enough light to use it. The plant isn't struggling. It's making a calculated, precise response to the light levels it's actually receiving. And those levels are almost certainly not what you think they are. Here's what most people get wrong about indoor light. We judge it by how bright a room feels to our eyes. But human vision adapts, aggressively, automatically, without us noticing. You walk into a room that gets indirect northern light, and after 30 seconds, it feels fine, comfortable, normal. Your visual system has compensated. The plant has no such compensation. It's measuring the raw photon intensity hitting its surface, and in most interior spaces, especially corners, especially more than 6 or 7 feet from a window, that intensity is a fraction of what even an overcast day outside looks like. A room that feels bright to you might be running at 5% of the light that same window receives on the other side of the glass. The stretching pothos is not being dramatic. It's giving you an accurate spatial map of where the light in your room actually reaches and where it stops. Now, the instrument plant for this variable is something most people own and almost no one reads correctly. The succulent. Succulents are native to high-intensity, direct sun environments. When they're in adequate light, they stay compact, tight rosette, leaves stacked close, color-saturated, and sometimes edged with stress pigment. When light drops, they do something called etiolation. They stretch. Rapidly, directionally, unmistakably. A succulent that was a tight 2-inch rosette will within weeks throw out a long, pale neck reaching toward the nearest window. The direction it's reaching is data. The rate it's stretching is data. If your succulent has been slowly leaning toward one specific corner of the room for months, it's telling you exactly where the best light source is and approximately how far that light penetrates before it degrades. You can trace the geometry of your window's light output by watching where your succulents point. That's not metaphor, that's a directional sensor doing its job. And this is where both readings, the humidity from the first half of this video, the light from this one, start to build something more useful than individual plant diagnoses. You now have data on 2 of the core variables that define what your indoor environment actually is: how dry the air runs and how light moves through the space. Both of them came not from apps or devices, but from organisms that have been sitting in your home, measuring continuously, expressing what they find in their growth patterns and tissue health. You've been living with these readings the whole time. The question is whether you decide to pay attention. Most people never do, not because they don't care, but because nobody ever told them what they were looking at. They see a brown tip and feel vaguely guilty. They see a stretching succulent and assume they bought a bad one. The signal gets cut off or thrown out or ignored, and the room stays unknown. Your home has a character, measurable, specific, consequential. The air quality, the light geometry, the temperature gradients, the airflow patterns, these aren't abstract. They're the conditions you live inside every single day. And you don't need a sensor array to start understanding them. You just need to change the question you're asking when you look at what's already in the room with you.